Korea and Turkmenistan agreed to bolster cooperation in energy and infrastructure, both at government and business levels, during President Yoon's state visit to Central Asia. A number of North Korean troops crossed the inter-Korean border 2 days ago, apparently by accident. They immediately returned after warning broadcasts and shots by the South Korean military. Korea's current account dropped into a deficit in April due to increased dividend payments to foreign investors and rising import prices. It's June 11th, 2024. This is Newscenter. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Min. South Korea and Turkmenistan have agreed to boost business projects for energy and infrastructure and to discourage North Korea's nuclear weapons pursuits. This as President Yoon is on a state visit to 3 Central Asian countries and held talks with his Turkmen counterpart. Our senior correspondent Woo Soo-young files this report.
South Korea and Turkmenistan have agreed to boost cooperation on major energy and infrastructure projects, which are expected to rake in some $6 billion worth of contracts for Korean firms. This came on Monday as President Yoon and his Turkmen counterpart Serdar Bermuhamedov held a bilateral summit in Ashgabat and issued a joint statement as they oversaw the signing of some 8 memorandums of understanding.
오늘 저는 베르디 무하메도프 대통령님과 회담을 갖고 기존 협력을 더욱 내실화하고 협력의 지평을 미래지향적으로 확대함으로써 우리의 호혜적 동반자 관계를 더욱 심화 발전시키기로 하였습니다.
Turkmenistan and South Korea see enormous potential for joint cooperation in creating a supercontinental shipping route from Asia to Europe between East and West and North and South. We confirmed our mutual interest in expanding cooperation in the energy sector.
During their talks, the 2 leaders agreed to strengthen collaborations on large-scale construction projects, as Hyundai Engineering inked a deal with state-owned Turkmen Gas for the 4-stage desulfurization facility at the Galkanish gas field and resume operation of the Kianli polymer plant on the Caspian coast. The top-level meeting is also expected to boost Daewoo Engineering's chances of clinching orders for urea and ammonia fertilizer plants in Turkmenistan. These potential construction projects combined could generate some $6 billion worth of contracts, according to Yoon's Senior Secretary for Economic Affairs. To further boost business activities and exchanges, the 2 governments signed a bilateral framework to promote trade and investment in various sectors, including energy, green economy, and digital technology.
TIPF is an institutional mechanism for not only trade and investment, but also strategic cooperation across industry and energy in response to changes in the global trading order. Turkmenistan has not yet joined the WTO, so it was not easy for our companies to access the local market. But with the conclusion of this TIPF, a stable investment environment will be created.
Yoon and Bermuhamedov also backed collaborations on developing smart cities and transport infrastructure in a separate deal, as well as agreeing to ramp up cooperation in areas like shipbuilding, ICT, healthcare, climate response, and development cooperation. Their governments recently agreed to increase flight operations between the 2 countries from the current twice a week to 5 times a week, which would promote bilateral exchanges. During the summit, both leaders recognized the need for the complete denuclearization of North Korea for global peace and prosperity, emphasizing the importance of fulfilling international obligations under UN Security Council resolutions. As they elevated their partnership to new heights, the Turkmen leader expressed his support for President Yoon's K-Silk Road initiative, South Korea's first ever regional strategy for comprehensive cooperation with Central Asia, from procuring natural resources to increasing human exchanges and development assistance. As part of his 3-nation tour in Central Asia this week, President Yoon will also travel to Kazakhstan on Tuesday and Uzbekistan on Thursday. Woo Soo-young, Arirang News.
Wrapping up his state visit to Turkmenistan, President Yoon participated in a business forum. There, he emphasized the need to speed up cooperation in key areas while being joined by the nation's supreme leader. Our presidential correspondent Kim Do-yeon has the details.
Cooperation in the energy and infrastructure sectors were emphasized yet again as South Korea and Turkmenistan on Tuesday held a business forum at Turkmenistan's Chamber of Commerce and Industry in light of President Yoon Suk-yeol's state visit. President Yoon, joined by 200 business leaders from the two countries and government officials, including Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov, the chairman of the People's Council of Turkmenistan, referred to the Akar Teke, a Turkmen horse breed known for speed and endurance, intelligence, and a distinctive metallic sheen to speed up cooperation even further.
세계 4위 천연가스 보유국인 투르크메니스탄과 산업화 경험과 첨단 기술을 보유한 한국은 앞으로 함께 할 일이 참 많습니다. 투르크메니스탄의 명마 아할테게처럼 양국 경제 협력의 속도를 더욱 높여야 합니다.
He pointed to the Trade and Investment Promotion Framework signed the day before as the means to make this happen. On top of this, he said he wished to complete the signing of the Investment Protection Agreement, which will further provide the basis for companies to invest in each other safely. He also said how far the bilateral relationship has come is thanks to the business leaders who successfully completed projects that contributed to Turkmenistan's economy, including gas plants.
이처럼 양국이 한층 더 가까워진 토대에는 앞장서서 소통하고 긴밀하게 협력하며 실질적인 성과를 만들어내신 경제인 여러분의 노력이 있습니다. 양국 경제인 여러분께 다시 한번 큰 박수를 보내드립니다.
Chairman Berdimuhamedov also emphasized the results of the summit from the day before and said the bilateral relationship will play a vital role for both countries going forward.
In recent years, cooperation between South Korea and Turkmenistan has reached an even higher level, particularly in the fields of politics, diplomacy, economy, culture, and humanitarian efforts. The relationship between the two countries has seen significant development and has gained new meaning.
The comments are backed by the fact that he contributed to the bilateral relationship when he was the president.
Supreme Leader Berdimuhamedov, who visited South Korea 3 times during his tenure as president, made significant contributions to the development of bilateral relations, including the establishment of a mutually beneficial partnership in 2008. He is an important figure who has left a substantial legacy in the relationship between the two countries.
President Yoon last met with Berdimuhamedov back in 2022 when he was visiting Seoul as well. And the two, after the forum, moved to have lunch together to discuss cooperation in more detail. 김도현, Arirang News.
President Yoon says he expects to strengthen cooperation with Kazakhstan when it comes to energy, infrastructure, and critical minerals. His remarks came in a written interview that made the front pages of Kazakhstan's dailies ahead of his state visit to the country on Tuesday. President Yoon said he aims to bolster the bilateral partnership in not only energy and infrastructure, but also in critical future sectors such as key minerals, science and technology, and response to climate change. He added that Seoul will support Kazakhstan's efforts to ramp up its digital industry, especially in artificial intelligence, and promote further human and cultural exchanges, noting how 120,000 ethnic Koreans reside in Kazakhstan. Also, he lauded Kazakhstan's world-class example of denuclearization as the country closed down its Soviet-era nuclear facility and voluntarily dismantled a large number of nuclear weapons after independence. The South Korean leader will sit down for a bilateral summit with his Kazakh counterpart on Wednesday. One of the key words to describe this trip is K-Silk Road, as Seoul aims to strengthen its cooperation with the countries of Central Asia. Strategically located connecting Europe and Asia, Seoul sees plenty of opportunities in the young, growing region. Our correspondent Kim Jong-sil explains.
Central Asia, an ancient center of global trade and commerce through the Silk Road connecting Europe and Asia, is again growing in importance because of its strategic location, resources, and high growth potential.
Central Asia is a critical strategic location and land of opportunity. As global resource cooperation has become more important than ever, Central Asian countries are our key partners with their abundant resources, such as natural gas and key minerals.
Kazakhstan, for example, has deposits of a range of rare minerals, and Turkmenistan has the world's fourth largest natural gas reserves. Uzbekistan has several rare metals, including gold and molybdenum, as well as oil and gas. Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan have abundant hydroelectric resources thanks to their high altitudes. Seoul plans to deliver official development assistance in these countries to bring innovation and digitalization in public administration. The high growth potential of the region based on its young demographic cannot go unnoticed. 30% of the total population of those 5 countries is under the age of 14. With many ethnic Koreans still living in Central Asia, the government also hopes to strengthen people-to-people exchanges.
The vision of the K-Silk Road cooperation aims for the freedom, peace and prosperity of South Korea and Central Asia. We hope to pursue shared prosperity while tackling global challenges together based on universal values, while promoting peace in the region.
Seoul says with its technological abilities and the growth potential of Central Asia, the 2 regions can create even greater synergies by working together. The government plans to strengthen high-level communication with Central Asian countries and plans to hold the first summit next year. 김정실, 아리랑 뉴스.
Amid escalating tensions, North Korean soldiers stepped into South Korean territory on Sunday, most likely by accident. The troops promptly returned across the border after a warning from the South Korean military. Our defense correspondent Choi Min-jung reports.
A small group of North Korean troops briefly crossed the inter-Korean border on Sunday while working within the demilitarized zone. According to South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff on Tuesday, the troops briefly crossed some 50 meters over the military demarcation line at around noon after it appeared they'd become lost. They then immediately returned north after the South Korean military aired warning broadcasts and fired warning shots.
We believe North Korea had no intention of invading, since they moved north immediately after we broadcasted warnings and fired warning shots.
No unusual activity has been recorded since. The military said it is closely monitoring the North's movement and taking necessary measures. The announcement comes as tensions between the 2 Koreas escalated following the North's recent trash-carrying balloon deliveries to the South. Sunday is also when South Korea reactivated loudspeaker campaigns for the first time in 6 years and broadcasted anti-Pyongyang messages and K-pop. North Korea also installed loudspeakers near the inter-Korean border on Monday, but the JCS confirmed no broadcasts have been made. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
A power struggle continues at the new National Assembly. Having unilaterally elected leaders of key committees, the main opposition party says it'll start operating these. The ruling party is planning response measures. Our political correspondent Shin Ha-young has more.
After the main opposition bloc unilaterally voted to select key assembly committee chiefs, the Democratic Party is pushing to begin operating them while urging the ruling party to finalize forming the remaining 7 committees.
The DP will immediately activate the newly formed committees to address current issues and pass necessary laws.
This is the first time in South Korea's constitutional history for the main opposition bloc to select committee chiefs in a unilateral vote. The DP and minor parties unilaterally voted on 11 standing committee chairpersons on Monday amid a ruling People Power Party boycott. Before the opposition parties pushed through a plenary session to hold the vote, the rival party floor leaders and the assembly speaker met on Monday but failed to agree on how to share the leadership of the standing committees. All 11 committees are now chaired by DP lawmakers, including Chung Chung-nae, who will lead the Legislation and Judiciary Committee. The two rival parties have been at odds over appointing the chairpeople of the Chamber's 18 standing committees, with both parties vying for the chairmanship of the Judiciary, Broadcasting, and Steering Committees. Speaker Woo on Monday explained that he held the plenary session as it was urgently necessary to address issues regarding people's livelihood and tense inter-Korean relations.
As the speaker who has to run the assembly based on people's will and parliamentary rules, I couldn't keep delaying forming standing committees. People's livelihoods are at stake.
The PPP's floor leader Chu Kyung-ho criticized the DP on Monday for unilaterally appointing the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, stating that the position is crucial for partially preventing the DP from pushing through all its own bills. On Tuesday, the ruling party submitted a resolution calling for the resignation of the Assembly Speaker, accusing him of violating his duty to be politically neutral.
Speaker Woo violated his duty of neutrality by conducting biased proceedings and scheduling, and pushed through assigning committee leaderships.
The PPP will hold a daily party caucus for now to discuss plans, including whether to reject the entire upcoming assembly schedule and how to allocate the remaining 7 committee leadership posts. Apart from the committees, the party also plans to address livelihood issues through a separate task force within the party. 신하영, Arirang News.
In other news, Korea's current account dropped into a deficit in April due to increased dividend payments to foreign investors and rising import prices. Our economics correspondent Moon Hae-ryun has the figures.
South Korea's current account swung back into the red in April for the first time in a year on the back of increased dividend payments to foreign investors and rising prices of raw materials. Preliminary data released by the Bank of Korea on Tuesday show that the country's current account recorded a deficit of $290 million in April. This ends the surplus streak for the account seen since May 2023. The goods account recorded a $5.11 billion surplus due to a rise in outbound shipments. A majority of export categories recorded by the central bank showed a rise on year in total value, with semiconductors recording more than a 54% increase as the industry showed recovery from last year's lows. Imports, however, were also up due to the rising prices of raw materials such as gas and oil, which is the main reason the goods account surplus was lower than in previous months. The primary account that monitors foreign workers' wages and overseas dividend payments saw a deficit of nearly $3.4 billion on the back of increased foreign dividend payments. According to a BOK representative, this is because South Korean firms tend to pay out dividends to overseas investors in April.
Current account balance in April normally shows a deficit due to a deficit in the primary income account. For April this year, there was a temporary deficit in the current account because of the decreased surplus in the goods account with rising import value in addition to the primary income deficit.
The service account, which includes earnings and spending on overseas trips and transport, recorded a $1.66 billion deficit. The reason given was increased outbound travel, but the central bank said that an influx of tourists coming to South Korea from China and Southeast Asia helped to reduce the deficit. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
South Korea's economy is showing signs of improvement as exports rise, but domestic demand remains sluggish. Now, that's according to a monthly economic assessment report released by the Korea Development Institute on Tuesday. The institute said that the slowdown in the economy was easing as exports were up nearly 12% year-on-year in May, mainly due to strong demand for semiconductors. But the economy is seeing weak domestic demand, with retail sales showing a downward trend on elevated interest rates. Hopping onto a helicopter in Seoul's Gangnam-gu district to catch a flight at Incheon International Airport could become a reality within this month as Korea takes tangible steps to ushering in an era of urban air mobility. An Sung-jin files this report.
A helicopter flies above the city of Seoul. It will soon provide the country's first helicopter shuttle service.
Urban air mobility is not yet familiar, and the necessary infrastructure is still lacking. We're looking to build the infrastructure and customer base needed for the market, and once UAM becomes prevalent, we would like to contribute to the Korean air mobility market.
Opening its reservations on Tuesday, the helicopter service will start operating in 2 weeks. Its major route, which is from Gangnam to Incheon International Airport, cuts travel time from an hour and a half down to just 20 minutes. The chopper can hold up to 8 passengers, and not only does it shuttle customers to and from the airport, but it will also provide tours. The company aims to use helicopters as a stepping stone to further develop urban air mobility. This helicopter behind me could soon be an electric vehicle takeoff and landing aircraft, as the company is rushing towards pushing South Korea to the age of the affordable urban air mobility. eVTOLs use batteries or fuel cells rather than a helicopter's typical combustion rotor engine, which helps reduce noise. Data from the Korea Agency for Infrastructure Technology Advancement shows that South Korea is looking to commercialize UAM starting from 2025 and to further integrate it by 2030. By 2040, it aims to reach $10.9 billion in terms of market value.
UAM will be a new, smart mobility solution to increase transport efficiency. However, apart from technological advancement, we also have to look at how it can be integrated into the city and our daily life as a new transportation system.
In order to establish a well-integrated UAM system, the private sector should provide transport services, while the government aims to establish a traffic management system and provide the necessary infrastructure. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
K-pop boy group 17 will become UNESCO's Goodwill Ambassador for Youth. The group's agency, Pledis Entertainment, made the announcement on Tuesday and said that this is the first time UNESCO has made such a designation. 17 is expected to attend the appointment ceremony at the UNESCO headquarters in Paris this month and deliver an acceptance speech. The boy group was also the first K-pop act to deliver an address at a UNESCO Youth Forum, doing so last November when speaking about solidarity, dreams, and the hopes of young people.
The first tropical night phenomenon of the year was observed in Gangneung last night, also in Gyeongsang-do provinces and surrounding areas, where a heat wave warning was issued for the second day. Temperatures rose to around 33 degrees. Heat wave warnings were expanded to all parts of Gyeonggi-do, Jeollanam-do provinces this morning. The midsummer-like heat will continue tomorrow, exceeding 30 degrees Celsius across the country. It will be 30 degrees in Seoul, 33 in Gangneung, 34 in Daegu. From then, there will be many days when the temperatures in Seoul will soar to 32 degrees Celsius until the end of the week. Tomorrow, Seoul and Busan will start off at 20 degrees. It will move up to 32 in Daejeon and Gwangju, Gyeongju, 35 degrees. Daytime temperatures are expected to be below 30 degrees after rain in the Seoul metropolitan area and the west of Gangwon-do province this coming weekend. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is Newscenter for tonight. Thanks for watching. A panel session up next.
한국에 오면 먹어야죠. 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 하나, 둘, 셋.
Hey, Mr. Cupid, look my way. Make sure you listen to what I say. I may be stupid or quite naive.
끝없이 쏟아지는 포토스팟. 휴대폰 한 대로 감당할 수 있겠니?
Arrow straight through my heart.
웰컴. (24시간) 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
영화는 그 상상의 모래알로 이루어진 산을 올라가는 거하고 같다. 고도의 집중력과 무한 긍정의 에너지, 그런 것들이 끊임없이 요구되는 깜깜한 바닷속으로 내려가는 거죠. 저만의 바닷속에 뭐가 있을지는 모르지만 계속 이제 다이빙을 하면서 그 안에 저도 알아가는 중이에요. 저는 대한민국 영화감독 장건호입니다.
8 months into the deadly conflict in Gaza, the carnage in the besieged enclave continues, with over 280 people reported killed in Israel's latest operation. Amid the worsening humanitarian crisis, the UN Security Council has, for the first time since the outbreak of the war, endorsed a ceasefire deal proposed by U.S. President Joe Biden. However, the acceptance of the deal by Israel and Hamas remains uncertain. In this episode of Within the Frame, we explore the prospects for the ceasefire deal and the remaining hurdles. For expert analysis, we're joined by Professor Pan Gil-ju from Korea University's Ilmin International Relations Institute via Skype. It's always great to have you with us.
Good evening. Good to be here.
And joining us from Doha is Mehran Kamrava, Professor of Government at Georgetown University in Qatar. It's a pleasure to have you.
Pleasure is mine. Thank you.
All right, Professor Kamrava, let's kick things off with you. The U.S. has reiterated that the best way to end the Israel-Hamas war is for Hamas to accept the three-phase deal President Biden announced, which it says lays out a roadmap to an enduring ceasefire and the return of all hostages. First, tell us what the deal is and your thoughts on it.
This deal is not very different from the one that Hamas had come up with not that long ago. It involves 3 stages, as you mentioned. First, a release of Israeli hostages in return for Palestinian detainees, Palestinians who in the West Bank and also in Gaza have been detained en masse. Then a ceasefire, and then thirdly, reconstruction. And in that sense, there will be decades and billions of dollars that are necessary for the reconstruction of Gaza. And I'm glad that the international community, or at least the United States, is beginning to think about the day after and the return to some normalcy for the millions and hundreds of thousands of Gazans who've been displaced and are left homeless.
So the first phase of the deal demands 6 weeks of full and complete ceasefire, which would be followed by withdrawal of Israeli forces and the release of hostages. And the third stage would include reconstruction of Gaza. It sounds like an ideal plan, but as you pointed out, it is not very different from those laid out by the Hamas side previously. But Israel is yet to formally accept the proposal, and Professor Pan, top U.S. officials, including Secretary of State Antony Blinken and CIA Director William Burns, have returned to the Middle East to push for Washington's ceasefire deal. What are the key contentious points, and what's expected from their negotiations with their Israeli counterparts this time around?
Yeah, as you pointed out, most recently, Secretary Blinken also met Prime Minister Netanyahu and once again stressed the US-led 3 steps ceasefire draft. If then, why do they rush to go to the Middle East? To begin with, President Biden is displeased and losing patience with Prime Minister Netanyahu's reluctance to take the ceasefire deal backed by the United States and his military troops' indiscriminate offensive on the front line. In this sense, the dispatch of the Biden administration officials is intended to put Israel under pressure so that Netanyahu can take the ceasefire deal and furthermore can be restrained for military offensives. To top it up, it seems that the Biden administration is deeply aware that an incumbent would have serious challenges to winning the presidential election in November without achieving the Gaza ceasefire deal in a situation where domestic protests for this war are growing. That explains why on 31st May, President Biden hurried to unleash the new Gaza ceasefire deal based on the 3 steps, as Professor Kamrava pointed out earlier. So the question is why he again sent high-ranking officials such as Director Burns and Middle East Coordinator Gork right out at the moment in more detail. I will say that their visit to the Middle East is aimed at making the ceasefire draft agreed upon by countries indeed simply beyond diplomatic gesture. Well, this ceasefire deal was originally designed by Israel, but the United States draft did not seem to include the destruction of Hamas that Israel wanted. the United States also needed to confirm it strongly from the Hamas side. So more diplomatic roles are needed to make a binding deal. To put it simply, the Biden administration wants a substantial deal, not a symbolic one. Second, the Biden administration is well aware that since it has already been more than 8 months, as you pointed out earlier, since the war broke out, it is right about time to make a ceasefire deal and apply it to the front line, simply beyond the line of efforts to design the deal or empty promises. In this sense, I would say that the United States high-ranking officials visited the Middle East not simply as planners or interlocutors, but as executors. The visit of U.S. officials is expected to press all parties to be more sincere in agreeing to the ceasefire deal. Moreover, these visits are expected to gain pace for getting things done, particularly in a situation where the UN Security Council passed the U.S.-led ceasefire resolution. Anyhow, this high-level diplomatic push is aimed at not only achieving the ceasefire deal in the Middle East, but also winning the domestic battleground regarding the presidential election. In this sense, domestic politics is not separable from international politics, particularly in the transitional international order, where revisionist attempts are gathering pace in the world. Meanwhile, domestic politics serve as a driver in Israel as well, in the sense that Netanyahu's political coalition with far-right groups makes it hard to go ahead with the ceasefire deal. Most Israelis want to hurry the ceasefire deal. According to a survey conducted by a think tank, the Israel Democracy, in May, 62% of Israelis wanted to prioritize the ceasefire deal over military operations in Rafah. However, far-right groups threaten to say goodbye to the coalition if Netanyahu agrees to the ceasefire deal. That explains why Netanyahu disregards public opinion despite a growing opposition. This mechanism shows how it is a very two-level game where a national leader sees both the domestic audience and the external audience.
Well, we don't know the exact details of the meetings yet, but reports are trickling in that Netanyahu reaffirmed Israel's commitment to Gaza ceasefire plan during his talks with Blinken. But we don't know anything for sure yet. And as you've pointed out, domestic politics is also an important consideration for Netanyahu. The next few days will certainly be critical in ending the war that have raged on for 8 months. So we'll continue to keep close tabs. And Professor Kamrava, as Professor Pan has pointed out, the UN Security Council has adopted a resolution calling for Hamas to agree to the three-phase ceasefire deal outlined by President Biden. It's the first time the UN body has endorsed a comprehensive peace deal to end the Gaza war. How big of an impact would this have?
Well, certainly this is meant to put pressure on Netanyahu. And this is also the first time that the United States has not vetoed a ceasefire resolution put before the United Nations, but has also introduced one and calling for ceasefire. So we see a little bit of double standard here on the part of the United States. And as my colleague just mentioned, this is driven really out of desperation by the Biden administration to come up with some sort of peace plan, anything, any kind of a ceasefire that would have some sort of an impact in terms of the upcoming presidential election in the United States. But the pressure is now on Netanyahu. And if Netanyahu accepts ceasefire plan, then I think he is quite aware that his own political career is numbered. As we know, Netanyahu's political career spans for decades, and he's been in tremendous political and judicial trouble in Israel. And so I think we can safely say that regardless of how long the war drags, once the war is over, once the carnage and the genocide is over, certainly Netanyahu's political career is also over.
And staying with you, Dr. Kamrava, the death toll in Israel's latest military assaults across the Gaza Strip has risen to more than 280, with over 400 wounded, according to local media. An Israeli airstrike on a UN school killed nearly 40 people, including children, enraging the international community. While many assert that Israel's indiscriminate attacks against children and women are war crimes and genocide, what's your take? Can those attacks be justified?
There's nothing that justifies these kinds of attacks. This is not self-defense. This is indiscriminate murder and carnage. There's nothing, absolutely nothing, that justifies this. But I think we need to also keep in mind that Israel considers itself an exceptional country. The United States and the European Union and Israel's other friends consider it an exceptional country. And as such, Israel and its friends assume that international law does not apply to Israel. It doesn't matter what the International Criminal Court might say. It doesn't matter what the International Court of Justice might say. The killings continue indiscriminately. And I think it is time for the international community, for the American government, for the European Union to finally begin to apply to themselves and to Israel the same set of international laws which they seek to impose on other states.
Israel views itself as different, but same types of international global standard must be applied on Israel as well. Dr. Ban, despite mounting international criticism, the U.S. has said that Israel's latest actions in Rafah do not cross the U.S. red line. What are your thoughts on this, and what constitutes the U.S. red lines then?
Well, simply speaking, I have to say that United States red line is too high and arbitrary, which is bad for preserving the international order at the end of the day. In that sense, I feel the same way Professor Kamrava, actually. In more detail, the United States statement that Israel's military actions in Rafah did not cross the red line shows how the United States remains in a difficult situation right now, domestically, diplomatically, and internationally. First, the Biden administration can side with neither Israel nor Palestine, particularly when domestic factors are taken into consideration. The Biden administration is affected by the domestic Israeli power struggle, but at the same time, it is affected by domestic protests for Palestine. Second, when it comes to the viewpoint of diplomacy, the United States is in a situation where it cannot abandon Israel despite the latter's attempts to violate rules on the front line. Likewise, although the United States strongly blamed the Hamas attack on innocent Israeli citizens on 7 October last year, it is reluctant to strongly blame Israel for its indiscriminate attacks on ordinary Palestine due to the U.S.-Israel relations. Third, internationally, the United States is eager to preserve a rules-based order. In this sense, if the United States mentioned that Israel violates international rules, it should punish Israel in an effort to preserve a rules-based international order, even though Israel is its ally. However, the United States does not act in that way. These layered aspects make the United States face a dilemma in the sense that the United States cannot achieve all three objectives at once. So I would say that all these situations push the United States to lower the red line on Israeli actions. The United States says that the red line is a massive military operation in Rafah. However, I would say that red lines can be diversified simply beyond the military campaign. What about red line on Israel's indiscriminate attacks? What about red line on Israel's lack of proportional attacks on the front line? The United States' willful definition of the red line could be bad for preserving a rules-based international order because revisionists could justify their cruel attacks while taking advantage of the ill-defined red line drawn by the United States.
So as you mentioned, the U.S. has said that the scale of Israel's latest operation was small and targeted, so it did not cross the red line. But you're saying that it's time for the U.S. to perhaps lower its bar of its red lines. Now, Professor Kamrava, Israel has claimed that it's all set and ready for an all-out war against Hezbollah on the border with Lebanon if needed. The U.S. warned that the limited war in Lebanon could push Iran to intervene. How do you see the possibility of the war expanding to a wider regional conflict?
I don't think anybody wants to see the war in Gaza expand beyond what it already has been. And I don't think there is appetite for war in Lebanon, appetite for continuing the war in Israel, or Iran for that matter, or anywhere else. But we have seen increasing tensions. Interestingly, we have also seen increasingly pointed attacks and much more sophisticated attacks by Hezbollah on Israeli targets. They've been able to carry out attacks that have been surprising from a military and strategic point of view to both Israelis as well as to outside observers. And of course, Israel wants to see deterrence. I don't think Iran wants to expend Hezbollah in a war against Israel because Iran views Hezbollah as its own strategic deterrence against Israel and does not want to see Hezbollah's abilities degraded in a war against Israel. So we have seen an increasing ratcheting up of pressure on both sides. We have seen an increasing rise in tensions, but hopefully, at some point, both sides would pull back from the brink and we will not see an expansion or a continuation of what has already been a truly devastating conflict.
Right, tensions have certainly ratcheted up between Israel and Hezbollah in the past few weeks, adding to concerns that the situation in Lebanon is reaching a turning point. But as you mentioned, the last thing the world needs right now is an expansion of the Gaza conflict. So hopefully they'll find a diplomatic solution. Professor Kamrava, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is scheduled to address a joint session of the U.S. Congress next month. The invitation came from both the Democrats and Republicans, despite their stark division on how Netanyahu has handled Israel's war with Hamas. What's behind the invitation and what's expected from his address?
What's behind the invitation is the appearance that Israel can do nothing wrong. 37,000 Palestinians have died, civilian Palestinians, an overwhelming majority of whom are women and children. And yet we see congressmen and representatives in the United States from both sides of the aisle, as you mentioned, extend a warm welcome to Netanyahu to come and address the U.S. Congress. It's almost as if these American politicians are tone deaf. What has happened to America's soft power around the world? And what will happen in the coming decades and coming generations to the perceptions that people around the world will have of today in history? I think that's something with which politicians are, American politicians at least, seem to be quite unaware or at least unwilling to consider. What does this mean? It means, yet again, regardless of what Israel does, it can do no wrong in the eyes of the American political establishment. It makes it appear as if Palestinians' lives do not matter as much as they should. And it makes it appear as if Netanyahu, whose political career is in mortal danger, is really being thrown a lifeline in order to salvage what is left of his political career at this stage.
And Dr. Pan, Netanyahu argues that the Biden version of the ceasefire deal is incomplete. And according to a CNN report, he actually said that he won't engage in meaningless negotiations with Hamas shortly after the UN Security Council approved the deal. Would the Prime Minister meet with U.S. President Biden during his visit to Washington? And do you expect the meeting to yield some positive results, perhaps persuading Netanyahu to fully accept the deal?
Well, Prime Minister Netanyahu sticks to maintaining three goals of the war: destroying Hamas, releasing all hostages, and making Gaza become an arena without threats. However, these aims are most likely to prolong the war rather than make a ceasefire. So President Biden is expected to persuade Prime Minister Netanyahu to take the ceasefire because he is aware of the difficulty of achieving the aforementioned three goals. I will say that Biden's success in persuading Netanyahu is important not only for achieving the ceasefire deal, but also for maintaining the United States' prestige in the world. The United States is declining in the world, and in contrast, revisionists like China are rising. The reason why Israel is reluctant to follow the United States' request is partly related to the fact that the United States is declining. If Biden fails to make Netanyahu take the ceasefire deal, he could face the situation of losing initiative, losing the initiative of diplomacy in other areas as well. In this sense, the push and pull between Biden and Netanyahu is not a simple diplomacy. The outcomes could affect whether American prestige is maintained as a rule keeper or a hegemon in the international system or not. Accordingly, President Biden is most likely to pay tremendous attention to making the ceasefire deal embraced by Israel when he sits down with Prime Minister Netanyahu in this coming summit.
All right, we'll conclude our discussion there, but we'll continue to keep a close eye on the developments in Gaza, especially over the next few weeks. Thank you so much, both of you, for your expertise and valuable insights.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of this show. Thank you for watching, and be sure to tune in same time tomorrow to join our conversation. Goodbye for now.